This week on the Markcast, it's a shortened episode. I think it's probably a lot shorter than what we've been doing normally, but Reid's got a bunch of guests coming on to fill the show. And Reid, guess what? There's something that's not in the Google Doc at all. What is it?
We're previewing the Banjo Bowl this week. This is the first time ever in the history of the Markcast we have had no XFL news to speak about. So I hate, I don't want to lead with bad news, but we have tons of Banjo Bowl stuff. We have Ted Wyman.
It's really as good of a 2-week period as the CFL will see outside of the playoffs. And I think this is the heart and soul of the CFL right now.
We have Britton Gray.
It's always fun when these two teams lock up because there is that rivalry. There's that almost hatred between the two clubs.
And then we have Adam Laskaris coming on. We're talking all about CFL Week 6.
I think this is actually, a super important year for the Argos just as a whole, just to see where their program will stand and sort of where their reputation will be at just amongst the league.
Paul, any other striking notes of anything we talked about today?
I love the bulletin board material. Why they call it the Banjo Bowl. We'll get into all that stuff. I mean, there might be some political correctness issues, but I think it's okay to call someone, banjo playing inbreds and then correct it and say, I'm sure that no one knows how to play the banjo in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, it's a fun show. Lots of stuff coming up. I'm really excited for the second repeat of this rivalry with Saskatchewan and the Blue Bombers, plus all the other stuff. And also just really curious to see how many points the BC Lions beat the Red Blacks by this week. We'll see you soon.
That was a fast fade of music there.
That was intense.
I wanted to get out of that real quick because I'm stretching still because I haven't set the board over here because I'm moving this stuff around, but it's over here right now, so I got to stretch a little bit. Good morning.
Paul's getting on the plane here in 10 hours, so you're good.
I'm already on vacation mode. I'm sorry. I'm already on vacation mode. Going to New York, going to see a lot of people that say you're too, so it's going to be great. I love the Google Doc today says some info for Paul. It's borderline condescending, but I'm gonna let it slide. Well, I'm kidding.
No, because I want to make sure you have all this stuff in there. I want to make sure. So before we came on, I just got sent the Matrix 4 trailer just dropped. Do you think we should live react to the Matrix 4 trailer? Would that be a good intro to our podcast?
Well, you can live react. I've already watched it, so you can live react if you want to.
Am I going to like it? I haven't watched it yet. I'm not going to watch it right now, but in general, am I going to like it?
I mean, I have questions why do we have to resurrect anything? Why can't we just tell a new story? Yeah.
Keanu is dead, right? Didn't Carrie Moss die? I mean, they all died at the end. Spoiler alert.
If it's this 20-year-old movie, spoiler alert. They all died.
It's terrible too. I rewatched all those too, just recently. It really ends horribly.
Well, the dialogue is so bad. The dialogue is terrible in the second. The first movie, it's okay, it's all concept and highbrow stuff. And then when they start to get the dialogue, I won't let you die. It's really cheesy. It's super cheesy. And I think that was the problem.
Yeah, once they made Keanu fly, they couldn't go back. That was the problem. If they hadn't had him fly at the end of the first one, spoiler alert, it would have been. Anyway, we are talking today about Paul, your internet is glitching a little bit. Do you think we could turn off anything while we talk here? It's really glitchy.
We do this every week.
Today we are talking about the Banjo Bowl. I think my mom inceptioned into my mind because she commented on my post about the Banjo Bowl this week on Facebook, Mama Markcast, and she goes, "Oh, you mean Deliverance? The Deliverance." Yep. And so that's our thumbnail this week. So I posted on Twitter. I said, we are talking about the Banjo Bowl. Is this the correct artwork I should use? And I got a lot of people laughing about that. They thought that was pretty funny, that the Deliverance Banjo Bowl. Did you ever see Deliverance? Do we like that movie?
I did see Deliverance, and it's good, but I mean, there's some rough parts of it. There's some definite rough parts of it. So, I'm trying to talk and fix this internet issue that we seem to have once a month here. It's so fun.
It's okay. So anyway, very excited about the Banjo Bowl. We have lots of guests coming up today. We have Ted Wyman with the Winnipeg Sun. He's going to be coming on. He covers the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Going to be excited. Britton Gray, I just wrapped with him. He covers the Roughriders for 980 CJME. He's going to be talking about the Roughriders after their big loss last week. And then we have Adam Laskaris with the Daily Hive coming on. I haven't recorded with Adam yet, so I haven't asked him how to pronounce his name. But Adam is coming on. We're going to record with that later. Paul's flying out of town, so it's going to be a weird show. It's going to be a ton of CFL stuff. We're going to do the interviews, and then we're going to get out of here because, spoiler alert, Paul, this is the first time we've ever recorded an episode where there is no XFL news on the Google Doc. Does that surprise you?
That does surprise me. I'm wondering what happened there. Why there's no XFL news on the Google Doc, but I'm not going to complain either. Oops.
I mean, there's not even a modicum of anything of semblance of anything I could talk about XFL. I tried. Anyway, so I will show off now. Paul is still working on. I have my wonderful BC Lions jersey that came to me. Here, let me do it right. Courtesy of listener of the show, William. And Paul, you got to check this bad boy out. I'm going to not talk for a second.
I'm looking. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Markcast on the back.
So it says Markcast on the back. I tweeted at the BC Lions. I showed them my jersey. I got a lot of feedback and followership off of that. I said, amazing that listeners of the show appreciate my support of America's CFL team more than the actual social media. More than the actual social media of the thing. So anyway, stack show. And then also we have huge show next week. I just want you guys to know all now. Please like and subscribe. We don't talk enough about this. We're 11 away from 1,500. I want to hit 1,500 subscribers, but next week, stack show. We had a stack show, and I got confirmation that another guy can come on. I'm talking like TSN panelists coming on. I'm talking like voice of teams coming on. A big show next week. We all should be very excited for next week.
Very cool. Did that help at all, by the way? The internet issue, is it still glitching or?
It's glitching a little bit, but we're going to work through. Paul, did you see the notes about the Banjo Bowl? And what are your thoughts about why they call this the Banjo Bowl?
I love bulletin board material, by the way. It's great. So when I'm seeing someone like saying stuff like a bunch of banjo picking inbreds, that stuff is great and it lasts a long time. And that was funny to see. I'm glad, they're spicy in Canada still.
Well, I mean, this was 2004. I mean, does this fly in 2021, banjo picking inbreds?
Sure. Why not?
I mean, to me, that seems like this Troy Westwood should be canceled by now.
I don't know if you can cancel someone over an inbred comment. Like other comments, maybe, but not an inbred comment. I don't know. It's just me.
I just thought that was remarkable. Anyway, so we're getting excited for that today. A couple of just last notes before we get into everything. Big issues this week with the Elks Stampeders game on ESPN. I actually tweeted about this. The game wasn't on ESPN at all for the first half of the game. That they were airing 17 different versions of the U.S. Opens, and then I think the Red Sox were playing. But it was one of those things where I wish CFL would come out and address that stuff, because ESPN got on and they're like, oh yeah, we're working on it, whatever. But CFL has to know these things are going on. When the game is literally not on ESPN at all. And it's one of those things where I just wish that the league would, someone on social media that's obviously seeing this stuff, unless they've muted all of my accounts, would be like, oh yeah, we should yeah, guys are working on that. We're trying to figure it out.
Why would they mute your accounts ever, Reid? Why would they ever mute
you? Well, maybe because I tweet too much of them. I don't know. I tag them in too many things. No, I mean, Pat Steinberg's been on the show. I mean, CFL knows what a Markcast is. So anyway, a couple of just things last week, Paul. We finally had an honest-to-goodness CFL game, 51-29. Alouettes. Vernon Adams had the game of the century. Finally woke up and realized how to throw a football. Any of these game outcomes surprise you at all?
Let me look at the outcomes real quick here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to still fix this internet issue. I was surprised to see the Argos take an L to Hamilton, who, that was weird. That was odd.
Yeah, Dane Evans is the king that Mazzoli wasn't, and I think you'll be happy. Mazzoli's still on the bench. Dane Evans is coming up. Also, Rough Riders really tough. Loss at home. We talk all about that with the guests coming up. Heading back to Winnipeg, that's going to be tough. The biggest one to me was this Elks Stampeders game, and this is the first CFL game I've missed. We were at the Green Day Fall Out Boy Weezer concert. The best. What was it? What did you say? The best 2004.
The best 2005 ever.
But really surprised. Trevor Harris finally kind of woke up. They really got the offense going. I have to imagine that they're going to win at home again with the Stamps. A lot of these games are rematches this week. It's weird. Like the Alouettes are off, so BC's playing the REDBLACKS, but Stampeders are going to the Elks. I have to imagine that, and with the Rough Riders as well. Weird back-to-back weekends, but I think it works out. It works out well for some kind of rivalry stuff. So.
Definitely. So we got a lot of cool things to talk about today. Got some really cool guests coming on to speak about other things. So let's get into it. What else is going on in the CFL this week?
Well, of course, we tried to record early last week. We all had to work. We missed the big Elks reschedule, whatever. The big thing with this is the Elks now are going to be playing 3 games in 7 days, which is pretty remarkable stuff. They have the games here at the 13th, and then the 13th, the 16th, and the 19th, and the CFL is gifting them. They're going to be able to dress 5 extra players for the November 16th and 19th games. But this isn't like hockey where you can play back to back, or like baseball where you can play twice this is like crazy time. 3 games in 7 days.
There's a lot of physical wear and tear that goes on the body when you're talking about football. Like that's why. When teams are having you see some teams in the NFL have the Monday game, the Monday night game, and then the Thursday night game, and people are like, wow, how can the conditioning that football is just a different sport. It's like all the CTE stuff, all the physical limitations, getting hit at such, high speeds and velocities and all that weight. It's hard to do this kind of thing. So I mean, the Elks are going to be in trouble. They're going to be in trouble. They're already in trouble no matter what. But trying to turn around 3 games in that short of time, that's going to be rough. That's going to be definitely rough.
So Rebecca, I forgot to mention, but I was so excited to show off my BC Lions jersey. I forgot to show off this bad boy. Tim Capper, that came on 2 weeks ago, the Alouettes flight deck, sent me this shirt. So Dorothy, I didn't buy this. So this was sent to me by a friend of the show. But anyway, I will wear this on an upcoming episode of the podcast. But obviously, I had to wear my new Lions jersey today. But anyway, Tim Capper and the Alouettes flight deck, Tim and Cliffy over there. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. We were talking about the Banjo Bowl. Banjo Bowl is also officially sold out. Andrew Harris and many other Winnipeg people tweeted on Twitter about that. So that is 29. I think it's 30,000 doubly vaccinated CFL fans will be attending the Winnipeg Banjo Bowl game.
Going to be interesting to see. Last week's game, you had the Blue Bombers, win that game. Is it a repeat? We'll see.
Really tough to win on the road. Really tough for Saskatchewan to come in there to Winnipeg and do that. This is interesting. Trevor Harris has struggled the whole season. He was finally named one of the top performers of the weekend. Matt Dunnigan, who is really a force of my life, I've really enjoyed watching him lately. They voted and voted him, Vernon Adams, who finally woke up, and Brandon Alexander. But Vernon Adams really turned things around. He's had some confidence issues so far this season. And then Trevor Harris, I don't like. I can support the man, not the team. Right? Don't need to support the Elks, but I can support Trevor Harris. So good job for that.
Very cool stuff. Harris is crediting the Elks' character for their win over the Stamps. He says the team showed their true character in the victory, and he wishes he could take the whole offense with a C out to dinner, but can't due to COVID restrictions. That's so sad. Damn COVID restrictions.
Yeah. Well, Coach Elizondo came in, let go of a lot of players, talked about building the culture and the character of the team, and I'm like, oh, that's definitely like a buzzword for the Elks, is like the character of the team. And so that culture. I just thought it was interesting that Trevor Harris was like, oh yeah, it was our team culture that led us to games. Like, no, it was actually like you throwing touchdowns, but that's okay.
That's interesting how that works. Speaking of taking people out and giving people things, Hamilton owner Bob Young buys beer for all season ticket holders before the Labor Day with a U Classic. They're holding their home opener Monday, and Bob Young said, here, celebrate on me.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was great. The high school. This was their the win over the Argos last week. I thought this was interesting. They hadn't hosted a football game in a long time. Obviously, had a big. They were maxed out to capacity there, but he affectionately referred to himself as the caretaker, and so he had cards made up and gave everyone a free high school beer. I saw a lot of Red Blacks fans lament that all they get are like $21 beers or something at their game. So,
but the Red Blacks are hosting 500 frontline workers at the games this season. That's a really cool thing to appreciate all the people that were working the front lines during the pandemic. Really appreciate all the work that nurses and doctors have done over the last 2 years now. 2 years we're going on with this pandemic.
Yeah. Mark Gowdy, the CEO there, he goes, our frontline workers have helped keep us healthy, safe, and informed during a very difficult time. I think that's great. The NFL did that. They have people go into the Super Bowl. A lot of people in Tampa, frontline workers and stuff. And I think that's great. I think that's a great way to kind of give back. And who doesn't want to go to a football game? And especially, you would hope it would be for a better team than the Red Blacks, who are performing a little bit better. But I don't think beggars can be choosers.
Maybe they'll find an offense this weekend. Maybe, just maybe, they'll find an offense this weekend.
Not against the Lions. I don't want to hear that nonsense. I asked, when I wrapped with Britton Gray, I said, how many points are the Lions going to beat the Red Blacks by? Because hopefully more than like 15.
It'll be interesting to see. Speaking of offensive changes, the Argonauts are starting Nick Arbuckle at quarterback in Friday's Labor Day rematch against Hamilton. He's coming off a disappointing performance in which he did 18 of 32 for 207 yards, 1 touchdown, but 2 interceptions when at the loss against Hamilton.
Yeah, we saw a King sighting. MBT came out, played a couple drives. It's one of those things. Like, it's so funny. They were down like three scores or something, and they bring in McLeod Bethel-Thompson because like Arbuckle's just played terrible. Like, the game's done. And the announcer's like, well, McLeod's won games in the past. Like, we just have to see. I'm like, he's not a miracle, man. Like, he can't just come in and fix, like, it is crazy. I mean, you gotta, at some point, there's only so much a man can do. And I mean, I think they were down like 17 points. I can't even remember how down they were down, but it was like, I get the announcers want to like keep the excitement in the games going the whole time. But at some point, we got to be realistic about that. But yeah, I was hoping McLeod would come back in again, but he did not. So
we'll see if let's see how, if Arbuckle's starting, let's see how short his leash is, basically, in the next game coming up here against Hamilton.
Yeah, you see this. Mike Mitchell, famously even keeled. Mike was a little heavy on the Argos loss this week. Did you see they were talking about, felt like 2019, they aren't ready for the spotlight?
It's very interesting because, Toronto hasn't had the best franchise recently in terms of like getting attendance and in terms of success on the field. So, having that success after such a long time of maybe not having as much success, it's a question. It depends on how young the team is, and these are kind of things. These veteran teams that actually perform really well, it's clear that Toronto's got some more wrinkles they have to iron out.
Yeah, I mean, they made a ton of moves in the offseason, spent a lot of money, brought in a lot of people. It's just surprising that they still, it's a lot of turnover to kind of get things going that quick. I mean, I would presume next year they'll have everything together. But Mike, even, when he posted this, he goes, I don't think the Argos people are maybe going to be too happy with how heavy he was, kind of on the Argos. One other note, Adam Seaborn, I didn't get all the TV ratings this week. I'm sure they were posted, but with like Labor Day, it's all delayed and whatever. 980 average audience on TV for the Rough Riders Blue Bombers game on Sunday. What do you think about that?
That's pretty good. I mean, what have they been averaging recently?
Usually anywhere from like 400 to 600,000. I saw your favorite online message board Redditor say, I thought that we needed The Rock to be relevant.
Oh yeah, he's taking those shots again. He can't stop. He can't stop himself. He can't help himself when it comes to these shots against the Rock and the CFL stuff.
Yeah, but I tell you, I'm not sneezing any of this. I mean, I think a million people is great. I mean, obviously they've built this into a hell of a rivalry, right? I hope the same continues this weekend for the Banjo Bowl, for obviously the success of our podcast and everything else. But I just thought that was a million people. Obviously there was over 1 million. That the average attendance was 980,000. So
very cool stuff. The CFL is 114 years old today. depending on what you really judge, the age by. But, according to a lot of people that, getting our grills and getting our mentions on Twitter, CFL's 114 years old today.
Well, September 7th. I put the note there.
September 7th. So we're recording this Thursday, and actually it's not even September 7th. It's that was 2 days ago. Tuesday.
Yeah, that's why I put. Well, it was today as of September 7th.
Oh, okay, I get it now. My brain's still off. I'm in vacation mode already, clearly, and my internet is in vacation mode as well. Because I could see Reid whenever it's glitching. He's like, you can't help but have that look on your face when my internet's glitching. I'm sorry that I don't have a blank and T1 connection at my house just for you, Reid.
We're going to clean that. No, it's good. We're going to go. This was interesting, too. Came out that the Red Blacks, no longer a negative test is no longer going to be applicable to the game, that you're going to need to be proof of double vaxxed moving forward, which is interesting because a lot of the thing was no one had any restrictions and a lot of people had the test and whatever. Now you have to be double vaxxed to go to an Ottawa game as of September 12th.
This is part of that. We're starting to reward people that played by the rules and got vaccinated. We're starting to reward those people. So, look, this mandate thing it's coming. Like a lot of things, here in the U.S., President Biden's about to announce that all federal employees have to be vaccinated. No more weekly tests. If you want to work at a federal job, you have to be vaccinated, which, affects my sister, affects my brother. They're both federal employees. So, it's something that's happening all around, that these mandates are coming down, and it's going to be interesting to see how far this goes, like from CFL teams and then NFL teams, MLB teams, someone just needed to open the door, and then all the other teams are probably going to follow suit.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Washington, we just got emailed the other day because I'm on the small business people there, and it's all non-essential as of October. You're going to have to be to go to bars and restaurants and stuff like that. So
that's right. You did show me that.
Anyway. Yeah, Elks, they added some defensive power. Derek Moncrief, they've been added. He was announced this week. They're obviously coming back to take on the Stampeders again. He was with the Roughriders from Oklahoma State, really trying to beef up the defense. Big sign there. Elks let go a lot of people, obviously famously friend of the show, Derek Dennis, a lot of other veteran players. So obviously they're trying to bring in some more, on both sides of the line. But he was, in the NFL, played with the Dolphins or played against the Dolphins, and he was with the Rams. So that was a big signing. I saw that the Riders kind of had courted him to come back, but didn't pay him enough. And I think he got a $20,000 signing bonus, which is for the CFL, it's a lot.
That's a substantial. Is it Canadian dollars or American dollars? 20,000.
That's Canadian. So it's like $15,000. I mean, that's the thing is when we talk about these low CFL wages, and then you're like, it's Canadian.
Yeah, that's Canadian. It's not American. Speaking of adding, adding people. Is it what I'm saying?
No. This is just a funny quote from Winnipeg Blue Bombers receiver Drew Wolarski. I know him. I pick him in fantasy. If I just can't pronounce him. Wolarski. He's excited. Talking about Chris Streveler being with the Cardinals. He's a great dude. He taught me so much about work drive and ethic. Right. He was saying during video conference because obviously. I think Streveler's third string. I think he's behind 2 on the Cardinals, but we have Kyler and then whoever Kyler's backup is. But anyway, I just Drew's excited, Winnipeg, and it's good to see Streveler. I don't know. I mean, I don't think Kyler's a pretty healthy guy, but he went down at the end of last season. He had that ankle or knee injury, so maybe we'll see that. Do you see this quote? I had to put in a little BC Lions stuff. This Lucky Whitehead. Do you see this thing about him having a snake and stuff?
I did not see this. No. What is this? What?
So he says wild animals in big plays. That was the name of the article. Matt Baker, friend. He had to be on Facebook. It's a Lions content creator. So I have to imagine we're friends with the show now. He goes, my mom had them as pets growing up. He's talking about snakes. I currently have a ball python named Squeak. I said, following the squad's first post-bye-week practice. I've always loved snakes, monkeys, cheetahs, and of course lions. I'm planning to get a pet monkey soon to name him Abu. Oh, is that an Aladdin reference?
Yeah, that is an Aladdin reference. That is an Aladdin reference. That's funny.
Anyway, I just, I Lucky Whitehead he posted videos of him like lifting chains, working out. I mean, this is like NFL caliber marketing material from Lucky Whitehead. I'm very excited to see him as one of my leading BC Lions wide receivers.
Well, he did spend like I think 3 or 4 years in the NFL, like 3 years, I know, with the Cowboys. I think he picked up somewhere else too, if I'm not mistaken. Interesting.
Spoiler, I can't wait to watch NFL kickoff tonight. I mean, I know we're a CFL podcast, so I really can't wait for the Cowboys to get
Reid can't wait to watch anything but glitchy internet, apparently. That's what's going on. Michael.
I kept a smile the whole time.
What?
I said I've kept a smile the whole time on my face.
You're smiling behind the pain. Let's be honest. You're smiling behind the pain. Reid's a perfectionist, as am I sometimes, and so if things don't go to plan, he's like smiling, but he's like inside going, "Go stupid internet." This is a story for you, apparently. Your boy.
Well, I just, Michael Riley, face of the BC Lions, he had a really good, my wife's the teacher, Dorothy's the teacher, talking, going back to school can be difficult. Remember to embrace diversity and erase discrimination. I just thought it was great. Michael Riley coming out there, being the voice of a generation, telling kids not to bully. I just thought that was really fantastic. I love Michael Riley. I think he is a wonderful spokesperson for the league and for America's CFL team.
They're not America's CFL team.
We're almost done here. We don't have to talk through all this. I just put the power ranking so you can kind of see where everybody is. Obviously, Winnipeg's moving up there. The interesting thing to me is, BC 2-2 is down. I would have to imagine Calgary is the bottom of the pack. They have REDBLACKS there right now. I can't imagine worse. That's tough. It's kind of like 9A and 9B for like who is the worst team right now, the REDBLACKS or the Stampeders. Any other placement of any of these teams? Argos slipping to 5. Wow. Edmonton, moving back up. They were at 6, but obviously coming off a win, so helpful there. Any thoughts on the power rankings? I just kind of copy.
I just think it's funny that the Argos slipped to 5th out of 3rd, and then the Alouettes drop a jump from 8 to 4. Based on what?
Well, like I said, Vernon Adams apparently remembered how to throw a touchdown pass. I mean, this was like a big time. That's the thing, is they're just not consistent. It's really hard for me, like the CFL, and I get it's no preseason, and I get all this stuff, but I get so hard week to week to not know how these teams are going to perform. That like the Alouettes came out they had the bye week, so they came out week 2 and smoked, like killed everybody. And then it's like Vernon Adams doesn't know how to pass. He throws an interception. He's scared to play the ball. I'm like, guys, you need to be. Then they come out and they score 51 points. It's just crazy. It's really hard, like to do fantasy, to bet. I couldn't imagine sports betting on the CFL. I mean, all the jokes aside, like the play is just not consistent enough week to week, except for like the Blue Bombers. Because look, I mean, even the Roughriders lost. I mean, they were the big undefeated team. It's just crazy how much these teams bounce kind of week to week.
Very much so. And it's like, they say any given Sunday, like one team can beat another team. But yeah, this is just like, it's interesting to see the teams that are beating the other teams. And it's just, there's no rhyme or reason sometimes behind this. Speaking of that, like when you're talking about like putting up stats and putting up numbers and putting up like things, you look at a team on paper, like a team that's getting 386 rushing yards on 82 carries and 4.7 yards a carry, like if you're getting 4.7 yards a carry and you're running the ball every single down, you're getting a first down every single time out. 12.4 yards every time you throw the ball. A quarterback that's thrown 939 yards in his first 3 career starts. You're looking at a team like that and you're wondering why they have a 1-4 record.
Yeah, Connor O'Neill put that together. He goes, Calgary might be the worst team in recent memory. Because there's like on paper, they're playing incredible. But it's one of those things where, I think when Bo comes back, I think they're going to win. And I think Bo's going to get a lot of credit for those wins. And I don't think that like Jake Mayer has played exceptionally well for a rookie that has thrown 939 yards in his first 3 games. I mean, it's crazy. Like never played a snap in the CFL before, comes in and lights the world on fire. I mean, Calgary is out of it. I mean, they would really have to turn things around. But I just don't I hate that when like a guy that's kind of like helped keep the ship afloat, like if Bo comes back and gets all the credit, you're going to be like, no, keep in mind, like Jake kind of like helped right the ship here while this was going on. So
definitely. Some sad news now, though. A former Alouettes owner, Bob Wettenhall, has passed away. He was the owner for how many years? Like, I'm trying to see here. I'm trying to get the stats here.
Yeah. he was the ownership. He kind of helped rebuild the Alouettes. So they were crowned Grey Cup champion 3 times while he was there. They appeared in 8 Grey Cups. They finished in the first 10 times. I mean, he was a life. He gets a lot of credit for really rebuilding kind of the Alouettes franchise back a few years ago. Also, the Roughriders former president Bruce Cowie. I just saw this last night. They released a statement. The Roughriders. They're saddened by the passing of him. So I just, past owners obviously paying respect on that, but sad kind of on both regards for that.
Definitely. Rest in power. Our thoughts and condolences are with families during this time. And now Reid's favorite NFL team. Your Washington football team.
Yeah, last note with this, JP Finley, and I saw this floating around a lot last night, that Adam Schefter had a podcast with Tanya Snyder, the now, because it was, right, Dan Snyder, whatever, and right, Dan? Is that the right?
Yeah, Dan Snyder, yep.
Dan now. All the sexual harassment stuff. And so Tanya's in charge. She said it got misquoted, whatever, but basically we're looking at the final team names, Red Hawks, Defenders, Armada, Presidents, Brigade, Commanders, Red Wolves, and the Washington football team. JP thinks it's going to be the Commanders. What do you think about the Washington Commanders?
I don't think it's going to be the Commanders. I think it's going to be the Red Wolves.
Seeing a lot of, I don't love the Red Wolves. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's gonna be the Red Wolves, man.
That's like the fan one. That's like the fan one that they really want. He thinks that it's like they're keeping. Basically, he thinks they're down to 3, and they're keeping the Washington football team in because that's the one that they've had. They're keeping the Commanders in because that's what it's going to be, and then they're keeping the Red Wolves in because that is what the fans really want. But they're really not going to go that way. But you think I've seen like 87 logos posted in the last 2 days about the Red Wolves.
I think it's going to be the Red Wolves. I think they're going to listen to the fans here on this one because, I think they've taken a lot of power out of the fans' hands, and I'm not saying, that they did it poorly. Like they handled this. They finally handled this problem because it was a problem. It definitely was a problem. And I think that this is going to be a compromise. We're going to put the name Red in the name, and we'll just call them the Red Wolves. I think that's what's going to happen.
Anyway, so I just want to talk about that. So, and here's the deal. So Paul's got to hit the road. He's going to go see a baseball game, go see his dad in New York. I'm thrilled that you're getting out of town. So we are going to toss to Ted and Britton and then Adam, and then we're going to get out of here. There's no XFL news this week at all. There's nothing. Unless if something breaks here, I'll pop on with Ted later and add it to the interview. But that's where we're at. We're talking football right now. Brian has said USFL stuff is coming. I checked the USFL website again. Nothing's going on. So I think that sounds like a good plan. Paul, do you have anything else to say before we get out of here?
Nothing else but say see you next week. And if there's any late news, Reid will take care of you. And thanks for listening.
Well, Ted Wyman, thank you so much for coming on late on the day on Thursday. We can finally get back to watching some real football tonight. I'm kidding. No, but the NFL. Ted, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited about the Banjo Bowl. How are you doing this week? Busy week.
Yeah, very busy week. Always a busy time in Winnipeg, the beginning of September. You go to Regina for the Labor Day Classic. A lot of fans go, maybe not as many this year as most years, but usually a lot of fans do that. And then a lot of Rough Rider fans come back to Winnipeg, and both the buildings are sold out. It's really as good of a week, 2-week period as the CFL will see outside of the playoffs. And I think this is the heart and soul of the CFL right now.
Yeah, I love it. I love the friendly banter, right? I love the backstory. I love everything about this, right? I saw someone today, Luke, one of the media guys, was saying how this shouldn't be called the Banjo Bowl because it demeans, both of the premier teams, right? And Dave Naylor quickly said, well, no, it embodies all of this. This was a grassroots thing that came up years ago. What do you think about the whole inbreds and all this stuff and the back and forth and everything that goes into it?
Well, it's a different time now too, right? But when it was originally created off of a quote by Troy Westwood when he was the kicker with the Blue Bombers, and you should have Troy on sometime because he's a heck of a guy to talk to about those things. But, it came out of a comment that he did basically just to stir things up, right? It's like, and what the Bombers embraced out of it was that everyone talked about the Labor Day Classic every year. everyone gets excited about the Labor Day Classic. They've been keeping stats on it forever, since 1949. But then the next week, it's like, well, that's just the game that's back in Winnipeg. It didn't have a name. It didn't have a feel. And the Bombers marketing department embraced that. And there's an aspect of disrespect there. There's no doubt. But it was very tongue-in-cheek. Definitely not anything meant to be truly offensive. I think just a part of CFL lore that has kind of just taken on a life of its own. And, you see people at these games at the Banjo Bowl every year with banjos. You see players pretending to play the banjo. You see that it means something to people in terms of its appeal. And it really is a good time. The 2 weeks is a good time. And I do agree with you. I think it's generally a friendly rivalry between the two teams. I think even at the Labor Day Classic, you could see that there were Winnipeg fans in Pill Country, and they weren't getting hit over the head with cans. So something must have been going okay there.
Yeah, well, I mean, even because famously I'm a BC Lions fan, and people said, well, BC Lions don't even deserve, a rivalry this weekend, right? No one even likes them, the Labor Day Classic. And, and I said, well, we don't have to play anybody, that we're better than that. But no, but it's,
Never lost on Labor Day.
but I love all of this. So, obviously what made it so great this year is how great Winnipeg and Saskatchewan have been looking out of the gate. Was it surprising to you how dominant really Winnipeg was in the first game last weekend?
Yeah, it was surprising to me. I have media colleagues who called it. They thought the Bombers were playing better, particularly on defense, than the Roughriders. And the Roughriders coming off a bye week, there was a lot of thought there that it might affect them. Personally, I've seen so many of these games and been following it for so long that I don't really look so much at how each team is playing as the history of it. And Winnipeg has always had a very difficult time going into Regina and winning. In fact, Jamarcus Hardrick, the Blue Bombers offensive lineman, said that when he played for Saskatchewan, they were 0-9 when Winnipeg came to town, but the Riders won anyway. Winnipeg, I think, was 9-0. It was just a crazy situation, and it just works that way. So I did not think the Bombers were going to be able to do it because I thought the Riders were for real based on what we saw in those first few games. But as Willie Jefferson pointed out, the Roughriders really hadn't played any of the cream of the crop, especially in terms of pass rush, in the first 3 games of the season. And, he thought they would be able to expose the Riders a bit, bringing what they bring, which is a lot of heat. And it turns out that was true. In hindsight, I think, it made a lot of sense what Willie was saying. And you really look at the way Winnipeg dominated, and it was all about that. It was just that Saskatchewan had gotten a little comfortable with what was working for them in the first 3 weeks, especially playing all their games at home. They weren't comfortable one bit in that game last Sunday.
Well, that was the thing is, they had been talking about Cody, being MOP candidate, right? Outstanding coming out of the gate and running for his life, right? Taking really unnecessary, tackles and dives and things to, trying to get any yards he could. It really did seem like he struggled to really get any momentum going.
Yes, he absolutely did. And that was right from the outset of the game. You could tell. I think the Riders punted 3 times in the first quarter, and there was an interception. I don't think that they got much in the way of first downs, maybe 1 or 2. And I think that was the whole key to the game, other than the fact that the defensive line, the Bombers defense was all over them the whole game. But what the Bombers went into with a major key was to really control the ball in the first quarter, not let the Roughriders get that huge amount of momentum right when they come out of the tunnel through the fireworks and the flame and everything like that, and let the fans, go crazy over them getting an early touchdown. The Bombers didn't let that happen. And I felt like that really played into their hands. And then I started thinking, boy, this could be exactly what they're looking for. And the Bombers did maintain that all game long, but not having the fans in the game and never really allowing them to get into it. Saskatchewan never scored a touchdown, so they didn't have a lot to get excited about. That makes a huge difference. You're taking away that 13th man.
Yeah, how big of a impact has it been having Andrew Harris back on the field?
Pretty big. He hasn't hit his stride yet. I don't think that he would say that he has. He played, I think he got 81 yards in his first game, 95 in his second game. baby steps there because, I think nobody would be surprised if he's starting to get up over 100 fairly regularly before the end of the season. But it's been a long way back for Andrew. He was hurt right off the bat. First thing, second game of the second practice of training camp, came back for a few minutes, just, not even really playing hard, but just sort of trying to get himself going. And then he tweaked something. It was in his calf. And then he was out again until the fourth game of the season. So that was a really long time for him. He's not used to that kind of stuff either. We've seen that not very often. I would chalk it up almost entirely to the fact that he's older now, 34, and he also is, he's also coming off a 2-year layoff like everybody else. It's going to take a while, but I really thought that his mindset sounded like he was much more prepared for this last game. Had shaken off some of the rust and was ready to go be Andrew Harris. And I tell you, when you see him trying to absolutely hurdle Mike Edem in the A-gap and almost doing it, to be honest, that's vintage Andrew Harris right there.
Yeah, because you talk about, them coming out in Mosaic, all the fans, everything, they were really loud. And even the announcers, they said, Winnipeg wants to have this long, slow, kind of pounding drive down the field with Andrew Harris. And it really did it seemed like suck all the life out of the crowd there. I mean, it had to have been, a testament to the coaching, right, and the coordination to be able to just it was like a light switch, turn that off. I thought it was very compelling to see just how quickly they were able to do that.
Yeah, and you obviously have to, look at the 2 and outs that the defense was forcing. I mean, one of the things that I thought about in that game, there's a couple of things that really struck me. One was that the Roughriders never kicked off during the game. Winnipeg kicked off at the start of both halves, and the Riders never scored a touchdown, and the Bombers took the ball after the 2 field goals. That's pretty unusual, right, to have that. That tells you something about that game, no question. And also, the Roughriders never got into the red zone until the last minute of the game. And then, amazingly, Cody Fajardo hit the crossbar again, which, that just blew my mind and everybody else. It's like, that didn't possibly just happen, did it? But it did. And he was pretty good in terms of his humor about it. But, the fact that they were never able to really even get the ball in their control in Winnipeg's end really says a lot to how dominant that defense was. The Bombers' offense didn't really do that much in the first half. But boy, in the second half, they really moved it. They stepped up and they started to match the defense in terms of their production. And then the game wasn't close.
Yeah, Cody seemed, very upset throughout the game. Every time he would come to the sidelines, angry and like grabbing his hat and sitting. He just seemed very. Where he strikes me as a very jovial person, right? So, a competitor, someone that wants to try hard, but seemed visibly upset with how dominant Winnipeg was, kind of the whole game in his face.
Yeah, he doesn't say those things publicly, but you do see him wear it on his sleeve when he's out there. And sometimes, I wonder if it's not a little bit about play calling. I look back to the 2019 West Final, and there was a series of goal line stands by the Bombers, including the infamous crossbar that Fajardo hit at the end. But he was so mad when they tried to run off tackle with him on a quarterback sneak, and it just didn't work. And he came off the field, and you could just tell he did not like that play call. And I saw him do that a couple of times again this last game, just wondering if there's not something they should be doing a little bit different to try to break through what Winnipeg's doing. Now, the problem with that is, how do you know what Winnipeg's going to bring? You do know that Willie Jefferson brings the heat. You know that Jackson Jeffcoat brings the heat. But they had 9 defensive linemen dressed. That is not a misprint. 9 defensive linemen. Doug Brown, the great defensive tackle for the Bombers, Hall of Famer, told me that when he played, sometimes they would only dress 5. So for them to put in 9, it's about creating this confusion, this series of different looks every time. Plus, they rotated in linebackers. They actually would have a traditional linebacker in sometimes and a dime back sometimes, maybe 50-50. Man, if you're an offense on Saskatchewan's side, how are you figuring out what you're going to do with that when it looks so different every time? And I think that's been a huge key to the Bombers' success so far. Their defensive line coach, Daryl Patterson, who was a Bomber way back in the 80s and has coached for 30 years in U.S. college before coming back to Canada, he called it a stew mixed with really great players that puts together a recipe that is very much for success.
So what's next then? Winnipeg, Saskatchewan clearly has to figure out what's going on here going into this weekend. I mean, you said it was so confusing what Winnipeg was doing in a good way. Do they have the recipe for success there? I mean, it seems to me that it's really hard for the Roughriders to come in here and actually try to get this win back.
Well, I didn't think the Bombers would win last weekend, and I don't think the Riders will win this week, but I was wrong then, so you never know. But I had this conversation with Bob Irving, who's a legend of CFL broadcasting, has been doing it for 50 years, basically. And we both kind of looked at each other and said, how do the Roughriders win this game? I mean, we're not smart enough to know how they win this game, but it's very hard to picture it, because if Winnipeg keeps doing the same things, and the Riders have basically had, 2-3 practices, 1 day off and then 3 practices to try to get ready for this thing. That's not a ton to make all those adjustments. I just don't know what kind of adjustments they can make that are going to actually throw the Bombers off. Now, that being said, the Toronto Argonauts did do that to the Bombers earlier in the season. They came into Winnipeg and they lost, and then they played great the next week and they won. And Winnipeg was certainly humbled by that. But one of the differences there was that I thought Toronto was actually building on some successes that they had in the first week, which was running the ball with John White and opening up the pass, and also playing great against the run and stopping Winnipeg in that sense. They did that in both games, and in the second game, they were successful. I don't really know what successes the Roughriders have to build on from last week, other than the fact that their return game was very good. And, perhaps that is a weakness right now with the Bombers, because the Bombers' return game is not good, and the Roughriders were able to put up quite a few points on them. Other than that, Cody Fajardo is going to have a better game. I think the receivers are going to have a better game. William Powell is going to have a better game. Their D-line is going to have a better game. The Bombers are looking at this as, we have to be better than we were too, or else we're not going to win that game. I do expect a strong push from the Riders, but at their best, can they beat that Winnipeg team in their home park? I'm not so sure.
It's just weird to me, and I will ask Britton this on the interview that'll air after this too. We kind of came into the CFL off the heels of all this XFL stuff, and all I've heard about is, Winnipeg was the underdogs and the Grey Cup and all this stuff. They come in this year, Hamilton is, the king of the league, all this kind of stuff, the favorite. But to me, Winnipeg is like nothing but dominant except for this weird fluke loss to the Argos. I mean, why is there this? It seems like dueling ideas about Winnipeg, where they're 3-1, the most dominant team, or 4-1 now, the most dominant team in the league, but yet also they're still the underdogs.
Well, it wasn't a fluke loss to Toronto either. I mean, the Argos deserved 100% full marks for winning that game. Nick Arbuckle was great. John White was great. The other running back there, I can't remember his name right now, but he was really good. They did the job, and they also got it done on defense. And so Winnipeg just, it is odd. And I've thought it odd since the start of the season that a lot of people were not picking the Bombers to be first in the West, and a lot of people were not picking them to be the Grey Cup champions again. I had a hard time quite understanding why not, because they came in with almost the same team that they had last year. There is a big aspect missing in Chris Streveler. I admit that. I mean, I think he was a huge part of what Winnipeg was able to do, but Zach Collaros was a huge part of it as well. And I think that's the only reason why a lot of people who have watched the CFL for a long time would take Winnipeg down a notch, because they think that Zach Collaros has a lengthy injury history, which he does. And they think if he gets hurt, Winnipeg's not going to be able to do what they've done with Sean McGuire, who is their backup and really is not tested in any way. I guess I have to agree with that, but it's also kind of hard to look at it that way, like to just assume that the guy's going to get hurt and therefore Winnipeg's not going to be able to finish the season with him and be what they are. The fact is, they would have won that game with any quarterback last week, because the defense only allowed 8 points. If that's the case, you're probably going to be all right. They've still got a great running game. They've still got very good receivers. And that defense, as I said, is really something special. I mean, you look at certainly Hall of Famers in Willie Jefferson and Adam Bighill. They're the last two most outstanding defensive players in the CFL. And there's other guys like Jackson Jeffcoat, I mentioned before, Brandon Alexander, who went in at safety and has just been nothing but great since the October of 2019 in that position. and a couple other DBs that are looking like all-stars so far. That is not ever going to be an easy defense to beat. So I like the Bombers' chances of being around. I think they're going to be in the West Final, or at least the West semifinal, and probably hosting one of those two games. And I don't see much from Calgary as being a potential threat to that. I'm not sure on BC yet. It's hard to tell, but that's a long way to come back from what they had last year. And Edmonton is pretty inconsistent as well. But the one thing that Edmonton has going for it is that they get to play Winnipeg 3 times in the next 4 or 5 weeks. And if they are going to make anything happen, they're going to have a chance to do it.
Final question on the Banjo Bowl. We talked about Mosaic, Rough Rider fan base, right? Rabid, Green, and else. Winnipeg, does it have that same level of excitement when you walk into that stadium? I mean, I know they're going to be at capacity. Talk about kind of the atmosphere there for the game.
Yeah, okay, so they're a little bit different, and I'm happy to be able to say that I have been to both every year since I've been on the beat here, and every year since Mosaic opened, in fact, and that place is it's a little bit bigger. Look, I think Winnipeg fans are incredibly passionate, but it's not an insult to them to say that Saskatchewan fans are more passionate. The truth is, Saskatchewan fans are the most passionate in the CFL. There's more of them. There's, they don't have other things that distract them as much like the Jets do here in Winnipeg. And it's really something, it's great. It's great to be a part of because of the atmosphere that they create. But personally, I think Winnipeg is very, very close, especially when it's full. You get the party atmosphere is outstanding, and a lot of the fans just stay in the concourses and party and watch the game from there. And it makes the stands look like they're not full, which is kind of funny because really the building is full, but a lot of people are standing. And it's amazing atmosphere out there. The fun that people are having, the noise they're making, the chants are on, the shirts are off. It's just it is really a fun place to be. And I enjoy it so much, even as a media guy, just to be there and observing it and listening to it. And I think that your original question is, does Winnipeg match the atmosphere of Saskatchewan? Well, in its own way, yes. They are a little bit different. But believe me, the Bombers are going to have a big advantage this week with the crowd noise. And in last year's Banjo Bowl, Cody Fajardo couldn't handle it.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I do want to get a couple quick thoughts on the other matchups this weekend. Hamilton going back against Toronto. Obviously, they seem to be looking a lot stronger than they have been, a little more consistent under Dane Evans. Thoughts about that matchup?
Well, they played their preseason, didn't they? The Tiger Cats, and they lost them. They didn't score. It was not a good situation, but they do look much more like the Grey Cup contenders that everybody thought they would be and thinks they will be again. I think it's really interesting that Dane Evans is back at the helm. I would be very interested to see if, maybe another team around the CFL starts taking a run at Jeremiah Masoli in terms of a trade possibility. Hello, Ottawa REDBLACKS. But I think that I think Hamilton really does look good, but I thought Toronto looked very good. I thought Toronto looked really good against Winnipeg, and to be honest, in both games, not just the one. McLeod Bethel Thompson had a not very good game in the first one in Winnipeg, but when Nick Arbuckle went in, he was much better. Then he didn't have that great of a game this time against Hamilton. They've got some things to iron out there in Toronto, but they do have some real potential under Ryan Dinwiddie. So I would not be shocked to see Toronto win that game in the back half of the home and home. I thought they did a great job of making their adjustments against Winnipeg in the same situation, and I think they can do it again.
Yeah, that was I blame us, the Markcast, for that. We jinxed McLeod Bethel Thompson. We had a big episode proclaiming him, and then he immediately went out and got pulled out of the game. So
I mentioned, jokingly MBT MVP after that first big game, and then he didn't even make it through the next one.
No. It is tricky, though, with these quarterback situations, obviously with Ottawa as well. My question has been all week is, how many points are the Lions going to win the game by? What are we thinking about the Lions and Ottawa, the late matchup on Saturday?
Well, so basically, Paul LaPolice, the former Blue Bombers offensive coordinator, has the 1-2 combination of Matt Nichols and Dominic Davis, which he also had in Winnipeg for a few years there in Ottawa. And well, I'm a big Matt Nichols fan and supporter because I think he's a warrior in the CFL and a guy who would do anything for his teammates and all that kind of thing. But I'm not sure he's got it right now in terms of his ability to get the job done for the Ottawa REDBLACKS. And I've never thought that Dom Davis really had that potential to be a starter. He's a good guy to have around the team. He's a good guy to bring in if you need him in a tough situation. But the fact is, as a starter, he has not looked very good either in Winnipeg or in Ottawa. And I do not like their chances with that combination at quarterback. And let's face it, the REDBLACKS didn't look good on paper anyway, regardless of how they look at quarterback. They had retirements on the offensive line that have hurt them badly. They lost players that just didn't come back after the year off. And it's, I don't think expectations are high there. I don't think that if you went around the league that there would be too many people that would be shocked if Ottawa didn't win another game or didn't win one or two more games, maybe get to 3 at tops. It's kind of going to skew things there in the East Division because Montreal, for instance, gets to play them 4 times. And then we're going to look at the record at the end of the year and say, well, Montreal was this great team. Well, I don't know whether that's going to be true. I do like the Lions' chances of putting up a double-digit win.
Is it like ripcord time for Ottawa? I mean, are we like you were talking about a QB trade, the Arbuckle or whatever? I mean, are we, what are we doing here with the?
Well, they're not firing the coach, Lapo's brand new in the job. It's not like they're going to go down that road. So it's not really it's not pull the plug time. It's not blow it all up time, but you can't win in this league without a dynamic quarterback. And the fact is they don't have a dynamic quarterback right now. I think Matt Nichols will scrap and claw and do everything he possibly can to win football games. And he did it for the Bombers for years, and he got a Grey Cup ring in 2019, and deservedly so, even though he didn't play in the playoffs. But, it's hard after a year off. And he also is coming off a shoulder surgery, and I'm not sure that the arm strength is there. There's a big noticeable difference in Winnipeg with what Zach Collaros is able to do right now. I don't know if Zach Collaros is in his prime, but he's not far from it. And the way he's throwing the football is really, it completely changes what Winnipeg can do on offense because they have this deep threat and it's accurate, all the time. And Matt Nichols was not as proficient in that manner. So I just don't know how Ottawa makes this work with the quarterback situation. Maybe they take their losses this year. Maybe they just play the younger quarterback or younger quarterbacks and try to develop some guys. And then maybe they take a run at a big free agent in the offseason. But otherwise, I don't see how this is going to turn out well for them.
And I guess it was for Mazzoli, not Arbuckle. I was having my QBs confused. In terms of the Elks, really, on paper, seemed to really dominate last week, right, against the Stampeders. It's sad to me because I think Jake Maier is playing phenomenal football, right? I mean, for someone that's played 3 games and the stats, and we had all the stats in the show talking about it. Why can't Calgary just seem to get it together right now? And what is the Elks doing that? I mean, obviously they came back from the struggles and COVID and everything else. I mean, who would have thought they would have put up 32 points? I would not.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the last few seasons where Trevor Harris has been great at throwing the ball between the 20s, but not so much in the red zone. He hasn't been able to get the touchdowns, and then he gets 4 touchdowns in this last game. And I thought he looked really good. Look, if Trevor Harris is playing top-notch football and you've got Darrell Walker and Greg Ellingson on your team, among others, as receivers, you're going to start to do some things. And I think that, that's a really good sign for the Elks that things went as well as they did this last time. I mean, when they lost that game to Ottawa earlier in the year, there was obviously a lot of rust involved in that, but that was a shocker. I mean, really, that should not happen to a team like Edmonton. Calgary's just not that good right now. I hear differing opinions on that they're only losing by a few points here and there. They're not, they've been close and they could surprise. Well, maybe that's true. And they're probably going to get Bo Levi Mitchell back pretty soon. But I don't think Jake Maier was the reason that they lost those games. Certainly the game in Winnipeg, he completed 17 of 17 passes to start the game and gave them a chance to win it at the end. And unfortunately, Paredes came up short. So I'm not convinced that Calgary is out of this thing in terms of the race in the West. But to me, so far, they look like the team that's kind of slipping back the most. And that's not just based on the 1-4 record. They don't look like they have that, what it takes to win the close games and to win, the big games, obviously, because Edmonton really took it to them. And it would not be a surprise to see them do it again. That being said, if Bo Levi Mitchell comes back, that's obviously, regardless of how well Jake Maier played, that is a rallying point for that team because he's a true leader and a huge part of that organization.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I mean, Jake Maier has set himself up well for next year, hopefully, or whatever, to go to another team.
Ottawa REDBLACKS again. Yeah, there you go.
Any final thoughts on the Alouettes? Vernon Adams seemed to rediscover his love of throwing touchdown passes. I mean, 51 points. I was astounded. Everyone in my fantasy took Vernon Adams. I said, absolutely not. He's fooled me for 3 weeks in a row, and then he had the game of his life.
He was playing Ottawa.
Well,
so there's that. But I mean, in all honesty, I love watching Vernon Adams play. And I'm a big Kahari Jones fan as well. And I think he's done a great job in Montreal since he took over at the beginning of the 2019 season. And he's helped Vernon Adams become a star. He has his blips, and he's had them this year already. But that's a guy that when he gets going, he can really sling it. And he's got some guys to throw to there as well. And I mean, I don't know, is Jake Winnipeg the best receiver in the CFL right now? I'm going to ask that question of you because I think it's possible. No disrespect to Brian Burnham or Darrell Walker or any of those guys. This guy is putting on a show out there in Montreal. And if VA can start, just putting balls up to him and getting him those chances, he looks like he's going to make plays. So that's a really interesting team. Like I said, they get to play Ottawa 4 times. I sure like their chances of being in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, they came out week 2, looked really good, and then kind of faltered a little bit. But if Vernon's got it just seems to live and die if he has the swagger behind him. He threw those interceptions and seemed rattled. And if he's got the confidence, he came out and was crying in the interview, and the win meant so much. And you got to get past that and be the leader. But yeah, I mean, I think he's got tremendous star potential. I would definitely agree in terms of the marketing and the team rallying behind him. So.
Well, I saw him, I can't remember the total number of points that they came back from, but it was about 30 against Winnipeg in September of 2019. That was the Grey Cup champion Blue Bombers, by the way, and he absolutely destroyed their defensive backfield in that game, and Winnipeg could do nothing to stop him, and Montreal came back and won that game. I think 41-40 or some crazy score like that. It really was, that was an eye-opener for me as to how good that guy can be. And I think this last game was just another indication. I'd like to see what he does against a really elite defense. And he does get Winnipeg twice this year. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes in that situation.
Yeah, interesting schedule for sure. And some of these matchups and non-matchups and everything else. But Ted, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all your insights and for coming on. I do mean that. And hopefully we can call you again, maybe closer to when Winnipeg, I guess, is going to go back to the Grey Cup again. Is everyone right? I mean,
we'll see.
You could be, you could have a good job all year, right? As the winningest, I mean, as far as we know, the best team so far standing, right?
Yeah, it does look good for them so far, but even in their championship year in 2019, they had a great big blip in the middle, right around September, where they, I think they went something like 2-7 over a 9-game spread. And, maybe a lot of people, they fell to third place, and a lot of people thought, well, that's it. They're not really contenders anymore. But when they wanted to and they turned it up, they played their best. There was really no one that could run with them. So we'll see how that goes again. Anyway, thanks. Love talking about the CFL, so appreciate you having me on.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
All right, cheers.
Well, Britton Gray with 980 CJME talking to writers. I'm so excited today. This really worked out well that we scheduling guests, and then it ended up having the Labor Day Classic, and now we have the Banjo Bowl. We have Ted Wyman also joining the show to give the Winnipeg side, so it should be fun. How are you doing so far with the CFL season?
It's been great, especially after last year not having a season. Give me all the football. I'm here for all the CFL as much as I can cover. And it's been interesting. I will say that it's been kind of unexpected in some cases, but in some cases, it's exactly what you expected.
Yeah, people told us that ahead of the season, right? Jim Mullen was on the show. He said, you can't bet on the first 3 weeks of the CFL games. It's too unpredictable, obviously with no preseason. But it is like, Vernon Adams comes out last week, has the game of his life. The week before, couldn't get anything going. It's very hard to know week to week on my fantasy picks who to go for.
Exactly. And everyone expected Hamilton to come right out of the gate. They were in the Grey Cup last year, and they've kind of been searching for their identity, it seems, a little bit. They might have found that out recently. But yeah, like I said, there's been a lot of things that you weren't really sure what to expect with a year and a half off. That's something almost unprecedented in this modern era. So it's been interesting, to say the least, to try and pick anything. You're definitely a braver man than I.
So I want to get your thoughts on all the games, but primarily, obviously, we have the Banjo Bowl coming up. Is that as big of a rivalry as it seems to appear, at least on my Twitter timeline and in the Facebook groups?
Absolutely. The Riders and Bombers hate each other. The players always tell us we can lose every other game as long as we beat the Bombers or as long as we beat the Riders. It's just that deep into it. And the fact that you've had this home and home for so long just kind of adds to it, because the team that wins Labor Day, which is usually the Riders, except this year and another year in the past 16 years, wants to win the Banjo Bowl. They want to try and get answer back, because these are two teams who, no matter what the standings are, anything can happen. Even if the Riders are in last place, Bombers are in first, the Riders will beat them on Labor Day or something like that. Same vice versa. So it's always fun when these two teams lock up, because there is that rivalry. There's that almost hatred between the two clubs.
So, the Riders came out looking really good, right? Obviously had the bye week. What happened last week? I mean, it seemed like Cody was running for his life. It felt like a lot of chaos. It just wasn't a good game. What was your take on the game last week?
I think what happened was all the questions we had about the Riders and all the stuff we thought they might have issues with finally came to fruition. Someone was able to finally expose some of these weaknesses. For the most part, Cody Fajardo in this offense has been able to kind of do quick passes. They've been able to get their first downs, keep their defense, keep opposing defenses on the field and kind of wear teams down. But you can't really do that with Winnipeg, especially with how good that defensive line is. They can get after a quarterback. They can make you feel uncomfortable. And that's what we kind of saw. This is an O-line that Dan Clark, the center, is the only starter left from 2019 from this Riders team. They brought in Evan Johnson, who started games in the CFL. But otherwise, you had a rookie in Logan Furland, who was here in 2019, but his first CFL start came this year. Cam Jefferson's first CFL start came this year. Andrew Lauderdale's first CFL start came this year. So it's just a lot of trying to figure out what was going to happen. And the Riders have been, for the most part, leading. They haven't had to rely on big plays yet. They haven't had to rely on a 50-yard bomb to get back into a game. And as of now, the Riders just haven't been able to find that big play ability on offense, whether that's just Cody Fajardo needs more time. The loss of Shaq Evans is big. He's one of the best deep threats in the CFL, so losing him is big. But I think I was looking at the stats, and they only have 2 passes over 30 yards, and their longest is 31 yards. So it's just, the big play wasn't there, and what happened was they couldn't find it. Winnipeg got ahead, and that defense is smothering in Winnipeg. So we'll see what happens this weekend. They always say if you lose the first one, you're in better position for the second in a back-to-back, because you're going to go change things. The team that won might decide, hey, it worked. Why would we change it? Now, the Riders are the ones who have to make adjustments and figure out how they're going to stop this rush from getting to Cody Fajardo.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you have an undefeated team, right? And they always say it's easier to pick them off if you haven't had to adjust too much ahead of time. A lot was made, and it was in previous weeks too, about Cody Fajardo, about his physicality, right? About him running. He had a couple really big hits, right, in the game. The one where it was weird. I think Rod Smith called it a burner. I'm like, isn't that a stinger, right? We call that a stinger, or at least we do down in the States. So, a lot of worry about that, right? About like this future, franchise quarterback for the Rough Riders. What did you make of the physicality of Cody's game?
Cody's always been one of the toughest competitors since he became a starter in 2019. He battled through an injury in the playoff game. And we knew it would have to be bad to keep him out. He wasn't going to just sit out for a stinger or something. It would have to be pretty bad because of how much of a competitor he is. But yeah, obviously, whenever you see a franchise quarterback get hit and come up a little hurt, you're worried about it. And Zach Collaros also kind of looked like he suffered an injury in the Labor Day Classic. And you're worried about that because the league is at its best when these quarterbacks are playing. You never want to see an injury happen. And so it's going to be, from what we've seen in practice so far this week, he seems fine. It seems like he's going to be 100%. But you could kind of tell Rider Nation just kind of held their breath when Cody Fajardo was on the ground there.
Yeah, I mean, it was scary. It was big, and it seemed like, some of these QB sneaks and things, I've noticed a lot of, okay, let's bring in the backup, right? Zach Clare, I can't remember his backup, right? But they would bring him in, right, 3rd and 1. And I'm like, God, I really wish that we wouldn't be, because the CFL does have a quarterback issue, right? I mean, there's only so many top tier talented players, right? And so you want to protect those with your life. I mean, the same that you would in any football league, but it seems like there's not a Cam Newton in the CFL, right? That's waiting to come up, that just needs someone to get injured to come up and take the call, Yeah,
it's an interesting thing with the fact that you don't have these kind of, I guess, highly thought of people. But every now and then an injury opens way. As Cody Fajardo is a prime example. He was always a short yardage guy through his first little few years here in the CFL. Zach Collaros goes down. Cody Fajardo comes in 2019 and lights the world on fire, right? Nick Arbuckle, another guy who got his opportunity because Bo Levi Mitchell was injured. So the CFL, like I said, there's a lot of people who look at these backups and are like, who are these backups? We don't really know. But you never know who's going to come in and be the next star. And that's kind of what makes the CFL fun, is that you get to discover these guys almost for the first time, unless you follow college football really closely.
Did the bye week hurt the Rough Riders, or are the Blue Bombers just that good?
I think it's a mixture of both. This Blue Bombers team, they won the Grey Cup in 2019. For the most part, they're all back. And like I said, defense wins championships, and that might be the most complete defense in the league. But the Riders did have a bye week. They went out, they kind of rested, and maybe that played into something. Cody Fajardo said this week the bye week might have been a hindrance to them because you kind of take your focus off the game. You're all relaxing. Some of these guys, it was the first time they got to go home to see their family for the first time since training camp started. So it's a little bit of both. I'm sure that a week back into it, your body's ready to go again. You're kind of back in the schedule, which will help. But this Winnipeg team is really good, and that's something we can't take away. They very well might be on their way back to a Grey Cup appearance, especially if they can stay healthy. But it's going to be very interesting, the bounce back game, because the Riders don't often have to go to Winnipeg to win the Banjo Bowl. Usually it's the Bombers trying to get back at the Riders for a Labor Day loss. So kind of uncharted territory, and it's the first time the Riders are on the road this year, too. They've been lucky. They've been at home for 4 straight games. And Cody Fajardo said that that's also a good thing. Teams bond when they're on the road. It's a different thing, something different. It kind of gets people in a different mindset just to hit refresh button, like he said. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is how this team bounces back, because there's no excuse of a bye week. Maybe some guys lost focus. You're focused in, especially after getting beat like the Riders did against Winnipeg.
Yeah, of course, my wife, her casual CFL pick, I like the Blue Bombers. So, yes, I'm sure they'll go back and take the Grey Cup. It is funny, because obviously anyone, if you haven't, but people that listen to our show, we got into this through the XFL, into the CFL. Winnipeg was the underdogs last year, right? Came out, won. And it's just funny to me. They come out again this year, lighting the world on fire, everything. I'm like, when were these guys ever the underdog? Like, I don't understand. Like, we still talk like, oh yeah, the Blue Bombers. I mean, what is it just a historical thing? I mean, why they talk about, their marketing's on brand now. They've got a good team owner. They've got everything kind of firing for them. Why is there this weird, like they were the underdog and now they're not anymore?
I think part of it is Zach Collaros getting there. He kind of, when he got there after the trade, he was here in Saskatchewan, got traded to Toronto, eventually traded to Winnipeg. And when he's healthy, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL, and that's a major difference for them. You kind of had some questions with what they were doing with Matt Nichols and Chris Streveler, like this 1-2 punch at quarterback. You don't see that too often. Doesn't lead to a whole bunch of success. But when Zach got there, he really took over that team. became a huge playmaker for them down the stretch, and especially in the Grey Cup. And you're seeing it now. Just he's been there in off season. He's staying healthy, which is the main thing with him. You always have injury concerns recently, and like I said, the league is better when he's healthy because he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and that's just part of it. Winnipeg has had all the talent around them, and now you have that quarterback there who's elite, and everyone kind of goes around him. And it helps that recently they have been very good marketing. They have a swagger to them. Willie Jefferson is a major part of that. A lot of people like Willie, even in Saskatchewan. He used to be here, but he still endears himself to fans. And when you have guys like that, it makes it real easy for you to sell your team, to get people interested. And they're backing it up on the field right now. They lost to Toronto this year, yes, but for the most part, they've really been solid, especially defensively. I think they're averaging only giving up like 13.4 points a game right now, which is incredible as a defense in the CFL.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I mean, a truly absurd, bizarre loss to the Argos right now. I mean, like, it's weird. Like, oh yeah, that, like, you know, how did that happen? Like, what's going on? I want to talk about, you know, going into, Winnipeg Stadium, right, playing, obviously had to be intimidating going into Mosaic, right? These are two of the stadiums, you know, have some of the higher capacities, right now in the CFL with everything going on. Obviously with Winnipeg, with, you know, the full capacity with the vaccines and all that stuff. Intimidation factor going into either one of these stadiums last week and then going in this week?
I think it's always there because you said these two fan bases are some of the most intense fan bases in the entire CFL. But the Riders view this as a challenge, as I'm sure Winnipeg viewed it as a challenge, right? You want to go in there and quiet over 30,000 people. And the Riders, I think, are kind of looking forward to not having the crowd on their side, and the fact that, okay, what kind of team are we when we're facing some adversity, when we don't have the crowd to really hype us up? And that can show this team where they're at this year, because they're going to be on the road a lot this back half of the season. Like I said, they only have 7 home games. 4 of them have been played already. And it's always tough to go to Winnipeg. Like, for the most part, the Banjo Bowl has gone the Bombers' way, just because it is tough to win on the road in any league. And so it's definitely an intimidation factor, but I think right now the Riders are looking forward to it. A, because it's their first away game. They want to see where they're at when it comes to being on the road. And B, they just like beating the Bombers whenever they can. And they love to do it in front of Winnipeg's fans, because Winnipeg has come into Mosaic Stadium these past few times in front of Rider fans and walked out winners. So I think the Riders want to finally give them a taste of their own medicine and show them what it feels like.
Yeah, I think it was Andrew Harris that said, you know, it'll sound good silencing 30,000. It's like, boy, I mean, they really did that. I mean, it was very quiet that end of that first half. Last question about the Banjo Bowl. I do want to get your thoughts on the other games. You talked about the Rough Riders needing to change things, right? You know, coming off of a loss going in. What are you looking for them to tune up or fix going into this game?
I think the main thing is you have to find a way to stop this Bombers defense from getting to Cody Fajardo, which is easier said than done with the defensive line they have. But they're going to have to try and figure that out. I also expect them to run the ball a little bit more. We haven't seen William Powell get too many handoffs yet. Part of that is because the run game hasn't been able to get too much going. But I think that to beat this Winnipeg team, you have to run the ball, because that can stop this rush. They have to respect the run a little bit more. They can't just keep bringing people after Cody Fajardo. So I expect them to run the ball a little bit more and kind of clean up those protections. And on the defensive side, for the most part, they kept the Riders in it in the Labor Day Classic. And so I don't expect them to change too much. They are dealing with some injuries right now, so we'll see who plays, who doesn't. But that's what I'm going to be looking for, is how do you protect Cody Fajardo? And if you can get a deep ball, if you can make some big plays, because Cody Fajardo just missed Kyron Moore on what would have been a touchdown. So it's just about fixing that. It's still early in the season. Like we said, the first 3 weeks, you're almost still working out the rust with no preseason games. So we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, I saw. I made a note. We're going to record our main show later, but about Purfoy is hurt. There's another Rough Rider injury as well. So yeah, I mean, certainly keeping an eye on that as well heading in. Some of the other games this weekend, obviously it's weird. The Alouettes, right, had like the game of the century. Now they have the bye week. What are we thinking about Tiger Cats and Argonauts? Argonauts really struggled last week. Offensively, still trying to figure out who is their quarterback. What are we thinking about this game?
I think we're going to find out maybe more where Hamilton's at. They have Dane Evans starting, and this is a team that got a win here. And it's always tough when you have a team with two good quarterbacks, Jeremiah Mazzoli, Dane Evans, kind of battling through training camp. You have that kind of quarterback controversy if one guy doesn't perform really well. So I think we're going to see where Hamilton's at, and Toronto's going to need to bounce back. They made a lot of free agent signings this offseason, especially from Saskatchewan. They have a lot of former Riders there. But that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, is maybe do we see where Hamilton is actually at? Because I don't know if how they started the season is how they're going to finish, because that is a very talented team out there.
Yeah, it's just weird. Like Dane Evans is like a resurgence of like life for this team. And it's really weird that when Mazzoli was in there, it's like, what are they doing different that they weren't doing before? It's like a totally different team under Dane Evans. It's really weird how much that team has turned around in the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
it just comes down to sometimes a quarterback just has control of the room, or just whatever they do, it just seems to work. You can't really explain it sometimes. And it's like I said, it's always interesting when you start the season with kind of a quarterback controversy somewhere, because the locker room's kind of split, right? If you have two guys who think they can be the starter, well, some guys like Jeremiah Mazzoli better. Some guys might like Dane Evans better. So you have to really come out and be like, this is our starter no matter what. And it looks like they gave Jeremiah Mazzoli did suffer an injury, which opened this up. But if Dane Evans continues to win like he did in 2019, it's hard to go back to Jeremiah Mazzoli, even though he's been a good quarterback in the CFL.
Yeah, and the last week they put in McLeod Bethel-Thompson, right? We had done our whole episode about him, and then they lost and all that stuff. I mean, it sounds like Arbuckle is starting again. Just a weird. He really struggled in the game. It was a really rough go of it. I mean, I was excited to see MBT get some time. I mean, obviously you don't want to see anybody, struggle that much, but it seems like they're still in Nick's camp, right? I mean, it seems like that's still kind of the go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I think Nick Arbuckle's the guy Ryan Dinwiddie wants. He got him when he was in Ottawa. Pandemic happened, never played for Ottawa. They kind of made the quarterback change. So I think that's who they want to start. But it's almost another Hamilton situation, right? McLeod Bethel-Thompson has won games in the CFL. He's been a good quarterback in the CFL. If Nick Arbuckle struggles, all of a sudden the voices start to say maybe he needs to get back in. So it's very interesting what's happening out in Ontario right now, because I know both those teams really want to make Grey Cup runs. Hamilton's been there, and Toronto, with all the moves they made to bring in veterans and spend all that money, they see themselves in a Grey Cup. So it's going to be a very interesting game to see where everyone's at right now with a shortened season, especially.
Last couple here, obviously the box score last week, I missed the Elks Stampeders game. We had Green Day was here, so I sadly had to miss the game for first CFL game. I missed this year. Very surprised with the box score came out, right, of how well the Elks seem to come together, right? I mean, they've really struggled so far. Obviously playing at home now. Do we know Bo's still out? I mean, this whole Calgary thing, they seem to be playing well under Jake Mayer. They just can't close the games.
Yeah, and I think that's just what happens. When Bo Levi Mitchell plays, he's probably top 1, top 2 quarterback when he's healthy in the CFL. And it goes to say something that a quarterback can just will a team to win when sometimes they shouldn't, right? It's just that belief. And I think that's just Bo's been there for so long. I think when he gets healthy, you'll see this this Calgary team obviously take those steps. And I mean, other teams in the West are more than happy to see Calgary lose some games because they've been so dominant in the West for so long. But you're really not going to know what that team fully is until Bo's back, I think. Like, Jake Mayer's looked good. He's fine, but he's still a CFL rookie. Bo's a guy who's been there, done that, won a Grey Cup, been to multiple Grey Cups. And so I think the key to that game is if Bo plays or not. And that's a completely different Calgary team, I think, when you get Bo Levi Mitchell back.
Yeah, I don't think they've made an announcement yet. I mean, I know that he had some limited practices right earlier. I guess it was before the game last week, before Labor Day, that they were talking. Finally, how many points are the Lions going to beat the Red Blacks by on Saturday? I'm really curious your thoughts.
I mean, a lot. But Ottawa's won a game too, right? Like, it's not like they haven't won a game yet this year, but it's just, that's another team that's kind of struggling right now. And you're making a change at quarterback, moving to Dominic Davis. And when the Lions are on, especially with Michael Riley playing well, that's going to be a tough team. They have a lot of weapons. And we kind of saw it week 1 against the Riders when Michael Riley nearly leads that comeback in the second half. Like this, the Lions are a good team. The Red Blacks, they have some holes to fill. But I mean, I would hesitate to think that the safe bet is the Lions, just because Ottawa hasn't instilled a lot of confidence in people yet.
Yeah, it seems, they pulled Matt Nichols. I have a lot of like Red Black stuff on my timeline. I see a lot of like, oh, he's washed up, he's gone, trash, his arm shot. I mean, Dominic Davis, it didn't seem like it instilled a lot of faith in a lot of the people that I talked to online. I mean, how are you feeling about that switch?
I think it's interesting. I mean, the coaches have a reason for it. Obviously, they haven't been able to find anything under Matt Nichols yet. But I mean, Davis in 2019 didn't instill a lot of confidence in Red Blacks fans. A lot of people assumed they were going to have Nick Arbuckle, right? That was a whole thing. That was the big signing for 2020. 2020 gets canceled. Arbuckle goes to Toronto. Ottawa gets Nichols, and now I don't know if Matt Nichols is hurt or what's going on there. But he just hasn't been able to put anything together, and the Red Blacks maybe panicking a little bit are making this change early. But I just don't know. Like, he didn't, like I said, Davis didn't instill a lot of confidence in 2019. They went out, found a guy, he left. So there can't be too much confidence at all in the Ottawa Red Blacks quarterback room. And it'll be interesting to see where this season goes. Maybe Davis comes in, lights the world on fire. He's a starter next year, but maybe they have to make a move for someone.
Yeah, it's just weird. It was like Matt Nichols' arm is tired. I'm like, okay, we haven't played in a year and a half. I don't really understand what's happening here, but yeah, we'll see. I don't want to be too boastful about that, but I do hopefully feel good about my pick for that day. Anything else before we let you go? This has been fun, kind of running through all those, and I do feel like we got enough Roughriders talk in there as well.
Just CFL football's back. These are kind of the best 2 weekends outside of the Grey Cup, obviously, of football for Riders and Bombers fans, especially because of the rivalry here. And I hope that if fans haven't had a chance to watch the CFL really these past 2 weeks, are kind of exactly what the CFL is about. The games might not be as exciting as you think sometimes, but it's all about the fans. And you can tell the fans care with the fact that the Riders were down by a bit, but the fans stayed right till the end, right? And that's what's great about both these fan bases, is that no matter how bad or how good the team is, they're there to cheer. And the Banjo Bowl is always exciting, and I just can't wait for it. It's a fun time to be back covering the CFL and just be a CFL fan, because after 2020 not having it, I want, like I said, I want all the football. Let's just talk football now for the next few months, because didn't get to do that enough in 2020.
Yeah, it was, I don't know if it was Willie Jefferson. It was one of the Blue Bombers was like flipping off the crowd as they were walking out. Did you see that at the end of the broadcast? I was like, this is wild.
I didn't see anyone flipping off the crowd, but I absolutely could see that happen. Like, I said, these fan bases hate each other. I think Willie Jefferson got some young kids to like take off their Rider jersey, gave them some Bomber gloves, and it's all in good fun. But at the same time, like you said, there's a lot of bad blood, especially if you grew up watching these two teams. And it's always fun because they have these two games have just that extra excitement and intensity to them.
Yeah, it is. I think that it, compared to like the NFL, the accessibility of a lot of these players, I wish that some of the social media teams and things were a little bit more approachable, like the players are. I'm like, this is wild, where the players are almost more accessible to the fans, both online and in the stadiums, and even the teams are, because I think, like, God, I mean, those kids are going to remember that forever, right? Remember the time we were at the game and we took our jersey off, and but like, that's a really cool moment, right? And that really speaks, besides just the skill of the football players, but just that extra level that I think helps them stand apart. I mean, I think is obviously tremendously successful for them. So,
Yeah, it's a fan-driven league. They know that the players love interacting with the fans, and that's something you don't see as much in the NFL just because of how widespread they are. But it's always fun. These guys especially know the history of the CFL. They're well aware of the rivalries, and they like to play into it as well. Especially Andrew Harris, he's from Winnipeg. He knows all about the rivalry between the Riders and Bombers. So I wasn't surprised he tried to add a little fuel to the fire.
Well, Britton, thank you so much for coming back on, or for coming on. I hope we can have you back on in the future. I hope we can keep you in the Rolodex, and I really appreciate your time today. And let's hope that the Riders bounce back this weekend. So,
excellent. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, today we have Adam Laskaris with us, who just correctly told me how to say his name. Adam, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you?
We're good. We're excited for the Banjo Bowl. We've got lots of smart Canadian media people joining us today to kind of fill us in on all the weekend's games. Besides Toronto and Hamilton, what game are you looking most forward to this weekend?
Oh, man. I think, I was going to say Toronto and Hamilton. I'm excited to get back out there and, go check things out. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to see, I guess, just from a BC Montreal perspective, just to see how the East is shaking up, right? Everybody's really, really tight in that East division there. So, I mean, of course, I'm looking forward to being at BMO Field tomorrow and checking out, Hamilton back in Toronto for the first time in a few years. But I think the East division's, really interesting so far in the season.
Your microphone's rubbing just a little bit on your shirt from your earbuds. So does the Banjo Bowl, does that do anything for you? I've seen a lot of, our big show today, the promo around Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, all that. Does that rivalry do a lot for you?
I mean, I think anytime that, you get to watch a tight rivalry in the CFL, just from a Toronto perspective, it's always kind of funny to see, things that you might not think about as much, just from perspective of somebody who's been in Toronto their whole life, and just seeing how things are marketed throughout the country. So, I can't say that it's a game that I've ever had a chance to go to. I can't say that I've been out to either of those markets, but I think it's I think it'll be an interesting matchup. I'll definitely be tuning in. So I think it is definitely going to be interesting to see how things play out in that one.
So last weekend, Toronto really struggled, right? A lot of quarterback issues. We famously had our big McLeod Bethel-Thompson episode. The next week he comes out, gets pulled from the game. Struggles going on in Toronto right now. What do you make of all that and kind of the QB dilemma? And it was just a really tough game to watch. Yeah,
I mean, so that one was. The Labor Day Classics, it's been something that hasn't been great to the Argonauts over the past few years. I guess, it's going back 7 years in a row now, right? Where Toronto has been unable to win that game. And it is something where you wonder if it's a mental thing for the players, just knowing, going into an environment where this is pretty much their biggest regular season game of the year for Hamilton, no matter where the teams are in the standings. And it's a one that's weird because it's early in the season this year, right? So that's a big difference. So, I was on the call with, Ryan Dinwiddie, head coach, after the game, and he said that, Nick's going to be starting again and got the depth chart again. It says that, Nick Arbuckle is supposed to be starting again. It is so strange in a season like this where, it's a shortened season, right? And these are two guys that have played in the CFL before, and it's hard. You don't have that much time to really figure out your QB situation. You don't want to be going back and forth, right? So it would be great for the Argos perspective if they're able to find that Nick Arbuckle is the guy that they want. If they're able to stick with him and not be having questions in post-game pressers where they're saying, hey, are you thinking about flip-flopping your quarterback situation again because suddenly you're in week 5, 6, 7. So I think it's such a short week, and it's one of those things that only kind of comes up in the CFL where you're playing on Monday to Friday against the same opponent. So if the Argos come through and they come looking out strong and Arbuckle looks good, then everything's kind of a wash, and you split a week, which is a rare thing that you can say in football. But if Arbuckle starts to struggle a little bit, then I'm not sure how quickly they want to go back McLeod. But yeah, it's really, I guess, a litmus test for the Argos and their QB situation tomorrow.
Yeah, it's just, obviously we have NFL kickoff tonight as we record, and, a lot of pundits and stuff are talking about, with the longer season, you can use week one as more of a pregame. We don't need to worry, we can fine tune kind of as we go into the season, where the CFL is totally different. It's shortened season, right? We're already a third of the way through, over a third of the way through, trying to figure this stuff out. Like the fact that we're going into week 6 and we still have like QB issues with Ottawa, with Toronto, Hamilton seems to have figured it out with Dan Evans. I mean, it's just, it's hard to really get momentum going as any one of those teams.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wild thing just looking from like the Argos perspective, going back to that, right? Like they come in on the hot streak, they win their first game of the season in Calgary. And then it's like, oh, we're feeling good. And then, you go right back on the road. You're 1-1 again, and then the Argos are 2-1, and it's like, oh, if they had won that game on Monday, right? They're feeling pretty. They're 3-1. They're top of the division, and now, just in the span of 5 days, you could be back to having a losing record, and it is, there's no space to really mess around, especially in the East Division. I think it's been tight, and it'll be interesting to see if the Argos are able to, come out of this year just from a 14-game perspective, with a strong winning record and something that looks like, they're able to build a sustainable, winning program, or if they're going to come out and they're going to, do what has been the norm for a number of years and either, be at or below 500 and then relying on a bit of playoff luck. So I think this is actually, a super important year for the Argos just as a whole, just to see where their program will stand and sort of where their reputation will be at just amongst the league.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, obviously, we've covered all of the XFL stuff and MLSE stuff. We've had other Toronto media on before. We've had other Argo. We had the guys from the Argos Fancast on, other podcasts. And it's just this weird thing, covering this team in Toronto that struggles so much, right, for, fan base, for these things. And then it's like, God, we just wish they would be a successful franchise. Maybe if they would win, right, if they would have some momentum, that it would help. I mean, nothing else wouldn't hurt anymore, right? I mean, what is the struggles like of covering this team and the city and kind of everything else that goes along with that? Because I know it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, I mean, well, the one thing that'll be super intriguing for me is just wondering what the vibe will be like tomorrow, hosting Hamilton, just because every time I've been to a Tiger Cats game in the past in Toronto, it's been a few years now, but there's always been a strong Hamilton contingent. And I think that's, likely to be the case tomorrow night, where there's people that are there. And, obviously if they're, they're committed fans, if they're traveling from Hamilton, it's not the furthest place away, but it's not like they're, it's just a short walk or a short drive to the stadium either. So I think it'll be interesting to see sort of what the fan dynamic is there as well. I think, BMO Field's been a beautiful facility for them. And I personally, prefer it to when they're playing at the Rogers Center. But I think it'll be, one thing will be, a test like that to see when you have a big rival coming into your stadium, how, your fans respond. And obviously there's, a contingent of Argos diehards that are there, they're making noise and they're happy, and the team's doing well, but it'll be interesting to see if they're struggling a little bit, just how people that might, be taking in their first Argos game in a few years will be handling, Friday night at BMO Field, if it's a tight game or if it's that sort of thing. So I think, these sorts of games are super intriguing. Your Friday prime time, you're competing for people's ad dollars and attention and all that. So I think tomorrow will really be, I guess today might be when it's released, but yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see sort of what the actual Argos fan base will be like, because I'm not 100% sure how to predict it.
Yeah, because we have like listeners that write in and they're like big Argos fans. Oh, they just released season tickets, a week ago, or they just started selling tickets, or we haven't seen any ads, or this is the one I've only seen one billboard in a week, or we get all these. And so I'm like, well, I don't know, right? I mean, I'm not there, and I'm not, but it seems like are they doing enough? I hear MLSE is doing enough. I hear they're not doing enough. It's just it's a confounding issue up there.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's important for a team like for an ownership group like MLSE, is to realize if they're, once that they've purchased the Argos, it's been a franchise that, for many generations has struggled to capture the, Toronto fan base. They obviously had their, their heyday sort of in the 90s, and they have a great history. But I think it's important for MLSE to realize if they're gonna, own the team, it's important to do everything that they can right, and they do, things that are of a professional caliber. They do things that are, what people would expect if you're coming from an American perspective, if you're trying to recruit players that don't know much about the CFL. And I know that what I've heard is that, Ryan Dinwiddie is a guy that sort of made those same demands of MLSE and of the ownership group when he came up here, and he decided, he has some success with the Calgary Stampeders. And I know that you need to, if you want, the Argonauts and the CFL and Canadian football as a whole to gain respect, it's important that you're really treating every facet of your organization like a professional one. And, the Argonauts are not MLSE's most important property. Everybody knows that, but they still need to treat them like a very important property. And not every decision is going to be made based on, how much profit you're going to be making on a year by year basis. But hopefully if they can, put in enough of effort over the years to build the right things around the program, then that sustained success has a possibility of coming.
Yeah, it's just they've made so many moves in the offseason, right? Mike Mitchell writes for us for CFL coverage, and he has the Argos, and all the moves they made. And he had an article that came out this week where it's like, man, all this work and all these things, and then they really just haven't shown up, right? And we're expecting a little bit more. I mean, what do you make of that, and just all the work and signings and everything they've done, and to be where we are now, we're right there at 500.
Yeah, no, it is. It is strange when you look at sort of the way that the season's played out, right? Like they definitely had a really strong game to start the season. They came in with an unexpected victory, and then they had a strong game, hosting Winnipeg, and then their other two games, they left a lot to be desired, right? So it is really funny how fast things can swing in football. And if you look at, just a 5-game sample size, if they go 3-2, you're like, oh wow, they've won 60% of their games. And if if they have a rough one tomorrow night, then it's like, oh, is this team unable to deal with adversity, right? Like realistically, you should be competitive in your home games, and they didn't look all that great on Monday. So I think it'll be a huge test to see sort of the future of this team this season. And I think that there will be tough questions asked if they look overmatched by the same opponent twice in 1 week.
Speaking of rematches, obviously Elks finally figured out kind of get some offensive momentum this last week, right, against the Stampeders. What do you make of that? I mean, we talked on the show. Calgary is playing well under Jake Mayer, even though the record doesn't necessarily show it. I mean, what do you make of that rematch on? I guess they're playing Saturday in that triple header.
Yeah, I mean, Stampeders, right? It's just strange to see them falling. It is so weird to try and relate everything back to, a season that happened, 2 years ago, right? Like it does feel like, we were, I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but, just the expectations for the Stampeders organization have been high for a number of years, right? And that's, they're another program where you wonder, not necessarily is this the end of them, but how many is this a year where they're going to be rebuilding? Are they going to be rebuilding for a number of years? Are they are they still the cream of the crop in the league? Because this point in the year so far, like we said, we're 1/3 of the way through the year, and they haven't looked it. So I think that's just a really exciting game from somebody on the East to be able to tune in and just say, hey, is this going to be a watershed moment for the Stampeders to turn it around, or are they just going to continue with a decline that I guess came pretty unexpectedly?
Yeah, I mean, I really wasn't expecting a lot from the Elks after the first couple weeks, and obviously coming off of the whole mess they had with the COVID things and not being able to practice and stuff, and then show up and win 32-20 or whatever it was. I mean, truly a testament. That was like last year when the Titans weren't able to practice for 2 weeks or whatever, and then they came out and beat the Bills. It's just I wasn't expecting that. What do you make of the Elks going forward? Is this a new breath for them, or have they figured some stuff out?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be strange. just I'm thinking like the internal politics of the locker room dealing with, an outbreak that sounded like it was mostly among unvaccinated players. I think that's got to be a really strange moment where the team has to sort of look, you're looking at each other and you're having these tough conversations that hopefully, you wouldn't have had to have had. And, I think that you're going to be, there's kind of a moment there for, I guess, the coaching staff and the players and the management where they're kind of looking and saying, okay, we have this different opportunity now, not necessarily a great one. I mean, there was talks that, they'd be forfeiting the game. Obviously that didn't come about. They rescheduled against the Argos, but I think that that's sort of, I'd be interested to hear what those internal conversations are like and what people are saying within the organization. Just being the team that sort of is, I guess, cast in a bad light sort of throughout the league, right? Like nobody wants to be the team that is causing their kerfuffle. Just, relating it back to the hockey season last year, right? Like the Vancouver Canucks, when they had their COVID outbreak and they were causing all these schedule issues, it just creates this animosity where every other team in the league is liking you a bit less if you're creating schedule problems for them. I'm sure the Argos aren't going to be pleased about, the fact that they're playing an extra game at the end of the season that they weren't planning for. So I think the Elks, really just internally, it'll be interesting to see how they can move forward throughout the season and if they do have that sort of target on their back throughout the year.
Yeah, like you said, last year, the Ravens, huge issues, right? Trying to reschedule everything. I mean, with Denver, where the NFL was like, we're not even going to deal with you. I mean, it really does put that mark on them, and especially in a 9-team league, there's just not a lot of room to hide behind. If we're the ones causing issues, it's just weird to me. We bring in Coach Elizondo. He, let's go Derek Dennis, let's go a bunch of veterans, right? Talks about building this culture. They weren't the right cultural fit or building this culture. Then you have this COVID outbreak, which is basically just a personnel issue, right? I mean, there's no issues on the field, right? It's players and choices and things. And then this week now, Trevor Harris, there was an interview with him where he said, I credit this win to, the culture of our team, to the personality. It just seems weird. It seems like there's a lot of talk of, must be the buzzword in their locker room about like building this personnel thing, but it does seem like they're the team that has the most issues not on the field right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's that old adage where people say that winning sort of fixes everything. So, yeah. I mean, if they go through a big winning stretch, right? I don't think the story of the Elk season will be their COVID outbreak, as long as fingers crossed that they're able to play a normal schedule. But it'll be interesting to see, because if they start to go on a losing skid, then it's an easy thing to point back to, whether it's 100% fairly or not, to attribute every problem that they run into on the season with that. But at the same time, the Stampeders have got quite the work to do to kind of get their season back on track.
Thoughts on my team, America's team, the BC Lions, facing the Ottawa REDBLACKS, and what do we make of that matchup?
I mean, it's a perfect matchup to kind of tune into as I'm getting into bed on Saturday evening, just kind of hanging out there. I mean, Ottawa's in another interesting spot, right? I mean, I feel like I'm saying this about every team, but it's going to be emotionally that's a hard game to be playing, right? You're coming from Ottawa, you're playing a late game on Saturday evening, and there's that just emotionally, I just know from like my own football career when I was playing when I was younger, and you're going into a game where you're thinking like, oh man, like if we lose this one, we're 1-4, and we're in that, you're in that realm where it's like you don't want to be, you don't want to see your season kind of be going down the drain so early in the year, right? So I think that's got to be, and at the same time, BC, they're kind of just like logistically, it seems like everything I've heard in BC, everybody's kind of in a weird spot with COVID right now, and it seems like people are wanting to have something that's fun to do, and they want to be able to show out and show up for these games. And there's been a lot of discussions about whether things are going to be full capacity or not, or whether things are backsliding and whatnot. So I think it'll be crucial for. Yeah, I guess it seems like every game this week, we've got a statement game for just about everybody involved, and I think that's one of the beauties of the CFL is just how tight it is, and this year's no different. And I think that this will be a big weekend for everybody that's playing.
It's fascinating to me. And I mean, that's why I love, I mean, we had never planned on getting into all this football podcasting stuff, but, following these teams and these stories and like just how quickly things can change or even, the similar stories where obviously you have Ottawa, where, we still don't have a quarterback there either, right? Here we are going into week 6. What do you think of that with the benching of Matt Nichols and Dominique Davis getting the start? Presumably again, right? I think they announced that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it, just anytime you're dealing with the quarterback issue, just relating it, back to the Argos, and it's just something that you don't want to talk about, right? It's just something that as a football fan and somebody who's following a team, you don't want your team to be, in a conversation where you're saying, hey, like, are we content with this guy, right? Like you don't want to be. It's funny how much of the football conversation still talks about quarterback play, just even for a casual fan, just all the time. So I think that just if you look at the REDBLACKS numbers, right, they've only scored 67 points in 4 games. That's not ideal, right? They've really struggled on offense. They've lost 3 in a row. So looking for a spark plug is, I guess that's all you can really do at this point, right? And it's got to be tough, right? Just being in that locker room and knowing like, oh, like, geez, like this is our guy. We got to trust him now. And feeling like you're hoping that the coaching staff figures it out if you're coming from an Ottawa perspective.
Yeah, it is funny to have Tim Baines, friend of the show, covering the REDBLACKS and being able to toss crap his way when after the Lions. Scarily squeaked by, I would say. I don't think that the last victory the Lions had was a rousing win against REDBLACKS for how poorly they've been playing, but it's still good to see. You said you had any other notes before we let you go? Any other talking points you wanted to make sure we got across?
No, I think like the big thing for me is just I'm interested to see kind of what that traveling Hamilton fan base will be like tomorrow. I think it'll be a good atmosphere at BMO. I've enjoyed, I was out at the home opener and it was a blast. And I hope that, there will be a bit of, animosity on both sides without anything getting too serious. Cause I think that's just kind of what drives the Canadian Football League. Just the fandom is having a good time, having an enjoyable Friday evening. And hopefully, we got some, angry Ticats fans yelling at the Argos players to come tomorrow night.
Do you think that the CFL as a whole, now that, Hamilton, came in heavy favorites, started slow, trying to figure stuff out, right? And, now we got Dane. If Hamilton is picking up steam, should the rest of the teams be wary now that, like, okay, now they finally woke up, this is something that we thought maybe it wouldn't be an issue, and now they are kind of coming out like we thought they would?
Yeah, I mean, it is funny, just looking at the history of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, right? Because it seems like we have a lot of conversations each year about Hamilton being the team to watch, and it is odd that in a small league that Hamilton has struggled to win the big one. So it'll be intriguing if Hamilton's able to pull it out, and I think they've got a great chance to really shut up the Argos, and the Argos who came out to a 2-1 start and they look like they're a hot team. If you are able to beat one of your biggest rivals twice in a week, then that's looking great for Hamilton. And I think that'll just, like, I mean, I've said this far too many times in this podcast already, but I'm just excited for those watershed moments to be coming and kind of set up the rest of the CFL season and really create some great storylines for matchups further down the road.
Yeah, it's funny because Toronto, tremendous social media presence, right? I feel like they do a good job, at least on Twitter, with kind of poking fun. And I saw that they were going back and forth with Hamilton this week, and Toronto hasn't won here, for 7 years or whatever. And they're like, yeah, well, Hamilton hasn't won a Grey Cup since Drake was in Degrassi or whatever. I mean, I enjoy it as an American fan. I enjoy kind of seeing some of this bantering back and forth between the Canadian, football team social media.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's always just kind of what drives it. And I think, like I said, it'll be interesting to see who's coming out and how big the fan base is, and whether they're bringing their air horns and all that. I think I'm excited for what should be a great atmosphere at BMO.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to end the program here. Paul and I, we recorded our stuff, and he's on a plane now heading to New York. So I want to thank everyone for checking out. Adam, we'll be sure to hopefully try to get you back on again, and check back next week. Like I said previously in the show, we have a quite a loaded lineup again next week. I was really happy with everyone we got this week, and next week should be fun too. So thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.